Okay, so welcome everybody. Gera, welcome. The session is being recorded for the information for people who might not make it this evening. So today I want to go through with you guys the um, midterm assignment, which is what we're looking at here in terms of schedules. So congratulations to the class in terms of completing all their presentations. So the midterms should have started from since last week, but because we finished so late with the presentations last week, uh, decided to kind of give you all a kind of day off, like so to speak, in terms of that. So in terms of the midterm exercise, it's already in the e-classroom. So if you go to the e-classroom, which is this one here, and you click on the midterm assessment, you'll see the document here for downloading. So you download the document here. And then when you complete the exercise, then you make your submissions into this portal here. Okay, so what does that document look like? That document is going to look like this. So it's a midterm evaluation. It's primarily a reflection type instruction. So basically, the paper consists of 3 questions required to answer all. There are no word limits for the question responses. You create a document like you do for a normal assignment, and use with your cover page, with your student information and so on, table of contents, page numbers, using a clearly readable font, double line spacing, the regular stuff, including where necessary the use of APA format, APA citation formats. You all are familiar with APA, right, guys? Or generally familiar with citation requirements?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Everybody's familiar with APA, or is there anybody here who uses a different system? No, everybody seems to be APA. All right. So the paper itself is marked out as 65 marks, but it will count towards 20% of your final grade. Um, so when you are submitting your paper in the e-classroom, I'd like you to name your files utilizing this file format naming process. It'll be your name, followed by the name of the assignment, which is mid-semester assignment, and your CRN. So the CRN for this class is 22296, I believe, is it? No, 91 22291. So that's the naming of the document. That way I can easily place your assignments into your folders without having to worry about, duplication and that type of stuff. Somebody else is coming in. Um, Paulina. Welcome, Paulina.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. We're just going through the instructions here for the midterm exercise. All right. So I went through this set of documentation here that tells us about the weighting and how you're going to create your file, um, arrange or organize your responses, and the amount of marks that it carries, as well as the naming protocol for the file that you're going to be creating when you post it to the e-classroom. All right, now, so the questions are, as I said, there are 3 questions and they're in parts. So obviously there's a length to this thing. So question 1 is specifically about the stages of group development. But if you look at the way the questions are designed, you'll see list the 5 stages of group development and briefly describe your experiences with each stage. So here you're reflecting on all of your past experiences with group work and trying to back up now. If you're familiar with the 5 stages of group development, anybody remembers? What are the 5 stages? Which team presented this one? Groups and teams, Reed, Modest, and Williams. So Modest is here. So Modest, can you remember the 5 stages? Forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning.
yes,
You
I
remember all
remember.
those things? All right. So what this question is asking you to do is to reflect on your own personal experiences with the various stages of group development and how your experience was in them. Now, prior to having this information, you may not have been aware of the group development stages. So therefore, you might have gone through things, but now what we want you to do is to look at what took place and examine them it through the lens of the theory that you now have in terms of group development. So that's what we're looking at there. That's a 10-mark question. Don't expect a lot of stuff, but we expect you to be able to reflect on your personal experiences with the various stages. All right, outline what you have done in the past to deal with, this is part B of it. Outline what you have done in the past to deal with group issues and conflict and compare them to the recommendations from the text in dealing with group conflict. What might you do differently in the future? So this is purely reflection. We know that groups tend to have conflict. So what this question is asking you to do is simply indicate what happened in the past. So a lot of times people may have just simply ignored the individuals that were given trouble and done the work on their own and submitted the work because they were trying to think. But now that you know a little more about dealing with conflict from the chapter, um, how might you go about treating with group conflict in the future based upon what you know now about groups and group conflict? All right, so that's what we're looking at here. So this is a journey into supposition in your case, where you're looking at, you know, trying to think forward now about how this information that you have from that particular presentation or chapter will now affect your future behavior. Okay, so moving on, any questions about this first question? Any queries or concerns? So far, so good?
Yes, good afternoon. So I
All
tried
right.
to find it on e-classroom. Where I have to look for that? I'm looking up and down.
You mean the chapter?
No, the assignment.
Oh, so when you go to the e-classroom, you go to the mid-semester assignment. When you click on mid-semester assignment, you can download it right here from the mid-semester. Once you click on that, you'll be a forced download. You download the PDF, and that's the PDF we're looking at. See it there now? That's this document here. Okay.
Okay, so
All right. So let's go to question 2. In the text, Exploring Leadership by Connies, Lucas, and McMahon, they proposed 8 assumptions about ethical leadership that are central themes in the study and practice of ethical leadership. So this is giving you context in terms of where to go and find that. That is related to the presentation 3, Integrity and Moral Purpose. That chapter is what you're going to be looking at. So these 2 chapters here from the main text, chapter 6 and chapter 7, are going to become kind of important for us to be looking at in terms of this assignment. All right. Now, explain what ethical leadership is. That's the first question. So that's a simple recall. You go into the chapter, read up on ethical leadership, find the definition, and give your you could quote the definition straight out of the text, and basically give your own explanation and of it for 2 marks. Take any 3 or reflect on any 3 of these assumptions, of the 8 assumptions, and give your thoughts as to their relevance to your concept of leadership in today's world. Support your response with current examples of leadership behaviors around us today. So for that information, what you really need to be doing is you need to be looking at the text itself. And this is the textbook that we're looking at here. For those of you who remember, this is the main text that we're looking at. We're going to go to chapter. All right, somebody's coming in again. Oh, Miss Rampol's fell out. Okay. So we're going to go to chapter 6, I believe it is. Leading with integrity and purpose. And you'd recognize that this was a chapter that was presented by a group of students from the class. And you'll go to that chapter, and during the reading, you'll come across the concept that they're talking about here during this chapter of ethical leadership. See if I could find a section on it. Toxic leaders. Yada, yada, yada. Right. Should have lined this up before. All right. All right. It is going to come. Here we go. Assumptions about ethical leadership. And these are the 8. This is what I was talking about. The 8 assumptions about ethical leadership. So once you read this area here and you get the understanding of what ethical leadership, you have to go through and choose any 3 of these assumptions and discuss that assumption in relation to their relevance to your particular concept of leadership today, as well as the evidence of what we see around us. Okay, so those are so we see here, ethics is at the heart of leadership. All leadership is values driven. Personal values intersect with organizational values. Ethical leadership can be learned. Ethical leadership involves a connection between ethical thought and action. Character development is an essential ingredient of ethical leadership, and ethical leadership is a shared process, and everything we do teaches. So those are the 8 assumptions, of which I would like you to take any 3 and examine them in terms of how you feel about them in terms of their relative importance in the world around us today, in terms of leadership, utilizing examples. Basically, who do you see around you who you see illustrating those kinds of assumptions that the model is talking about? Any questions about this particular this question here? Any queries about this question? Is it fairly understandable? Yes? No?
Yes, sir.
Everything's okay? All right. Now, you notice that these 2 questions are, this one is 15, this one is 10. This last question here is really where a lot of work is going to be required. This is 40 marks. So think of an ethical dilemma you're faced or somehow were involved with. Work through the dilemma using the ethical decision-making models identified by Kidder in chapter 6 of this particular same text. All right, now that's the instructions. Use the following rubric to guide your response. Explain what is an ethical dilemma, and I'm giving you how much marks that is. So you have to go through the process of explaining what an ethical dilemma is. List and explain the 4 ethical dilemma types or paradigms from Kidder's model. Describe the 3 ethical decision-making models. Identify and adequately describe your own personal dilemma. Analyze how you resolved your dilemma in light of the principles discussed above. And would you modify your decision in light of the information that you have now, and why? 4 marks. Then there's a couple of areas here: citation and references, APA style, 2 marks. use of language and organization of paper, 10 marks. So that's how the 40 marks is allocated. Now, question is going to be, do you all remember this chapter and its discussion? So this presentation was made by on an integrity and moral purpose. This was presentation 3. So first off, what you can do is go back and look at the video or the recording of presentation 3. So you get an idea, and you could also look at the presentation on the same day made by Selena, Modest, and Williams on teams and groups. Those recordings are on the thing. But more importantly, you also have the text, which you can go back and look to by itself. Now, in the text itself, you would see that after the same chapter there that we were talking about with ethical leadership, we talk about, that comes into the section where it speaks to the practical application of ethical decision making. All right. So remember, we're talking about the Kant's model. So there are other models that they refer to in the textbook. I want you to focus your responses utilizing the Kant's model. Now, for those of you who remember, we just get to the section on it. Here. Second. So it's a fairly long chapter because of the degree of importance of ethical leadership, moral talk, or dialectic. All right, ethical decision-making models. So the first thing you're going to be starting with by looking at this is, what is an ethical dilemma? Now, remember, ethical dilemma is not just simply right versus wrong. It's where two of your values come into conflict. They're both correct responses. So you have two correct values that are conflicting with each other in a particular circumstance. That is where how do you make that decision becomes more challenging, or which is why we refer to it as an ethical dilemma. Okay, so the approaches that I said we were looking at is the Kant's model, and Kant spoke about the 4 paradigms in which we can find ourselves having that scenario come up. And that has to do with, see, so here, tough choices, those that pit right values against another right value. All right, that's what ethical right versus right situations. So these are the 4 dilemmas here. Justice versus mercy, which is fairness and equity, conflicting with compassion and empathy. Short-term versus long-term, immediate needs run counter to future needs. Individual versus community, where a decision that will be good for you is not necessarily good for the wider group or community. And truth versus loyalty, where being honest competes with your commitment to your loyalty to a friend or to family. So those are the 4 paradigms. And then the methods of coming to a decision, he also indicated that there were three methods or 3 decision-making, ethical decision-making principles: ends-based thinking, rules-based thinking, and care-based thinking. All right, so just a little revision here for you. So the idea would be that you will look at Webster. Hi, Ms. Webster, welcome. All right, so good afternoon. So the idea here would be is that you will look at a dilemma that you have experienced. So again, you can't fudge this because this is coming from your specific experiences. And what we're doing is we're asking you to kind of go through and list and describe the ethical dilemma paradigm and the models, and then apply it to something that has already happened to you, and try and work through your personal dilemma and analyze what ended up happening in light of those principles, and try to work out, well, did I use what, first of all, was the dilemma a short term versus long term? Was it something that was loyalty versus truth, that type of stuff, in terms of whether or not, and sometimes what you're going to find is that dilemmas will be, can be categorized, the kind of dilemmas that you face can be categorized in more than one paradigm simultaneously, because they cut across barriers, so to speak. Similarly, when you're looking at what decision-making tool or model you utilized, is it care-based thinking? Was it ends-based thinking? What was it? Again, it may be a combination of more than one that was utilized in terms of making that decision, in terms of what actually happened. Now, the other part, question 6 now, is asking you to evaluate, knowing what you know now in terms of this whole ethical dilemma model, would you change the information or change the decision that you came to? And if so, why? But if no, not why? And that at question 6, the sort of analysis ends at that point in time, where you speak to the decision that was made in the type of circumstances that you found yourself. The rest is really about citation and how your paper is done. All right, so this is the one, this part of the paper is 40 marks. There are no other questions. That's it. That's all you have to work on. Any questions about this question 3? Anybody? It's crystal clear what you're going to be doing, right?
If
You sure?
if there are any concerns, we can reach out on WhatsApp or.
Of course you can.
Yes, we can. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course you can always reach out to find out if if there are any problems or concerns. So my question to you, however, is, right now, do you perceive any sort of issues that might come up? For example, what dilemma would you be using? Now you have to kind of go back in your life a little bit and think about things. Because remember, again, it's not simply about something where you had a choice between wrong and right. That should be straightforward in terms of making a decision. You do the right thing, right? The problem is where we face choices, or we come across circumstances where there are competing right choices. So the first thing I think you need to do is start to think about, from a personal perspective, what kind of dilemma are we talking about? What is the nature of the dilemma? Not the nature in terms of the short term, long term. What have I done in my life that has been of a dilemma nature? Now, this means that what you're going to be discussing can be potentially, well, first of all, it will be held in being very confidential. That's the first thing, because sometimes those decisions are very sensitive, or the circumstances that you're going to be describing are going to be sensitive. As a result of it being sensitive, there's no need for you to identify the individuals that are getting that. You might want to just say, this was a situation that involved, my brother and my sister. You don't have to call names and that kind of stuff to bring it, or a friend of mine's and her husband, or something along this. You can be very general. There's no need to be specific. All right. If it's something that was directly involved yourself, then you'll also have to, try to be as circumspect in writing about it. But this is an opportunity for you to write about something that has taken place in the past that to this day may not be sitting comfortably with you. And it gives you a chance to evaluate your decisions and what you did. Now, it's not about going back and regretting what you did, but realizing why you did what you did at that point in time, and categorizing it and evaluating it, utilizing the models that we're talking about here. All right, so that is the challenge that you face. First of all, finding a dilemma. And as we said before, if you're having issues, finding dilemmas or clarifying whether or not you've experienced a dilemma or not. I would expect that you should be able to communicate with me and ask me clarification questions and such. As I said before, the information that you're going to put into this document will be held in strict confidentiality. So don't be afraid to, write things and speak about things based upon, the truths that you've dealt with. All right. Okay. Any questions? No? All right. So I'm going to pause the recording since nobody has any questions. And